stands as an empty book, ever filled with pages of white before you. By every choice you make, whether good, bad, fair, or indifferent, will cause the author's hand to write your story, word by word, page by page, and chapter by chapter, leading up until this present moment. Madam Promaster, fellow Toastmasters, and we don't have any guests, but if they do show up, if your life story up to this present moment were to be written in a book and distributed to millions, would you be satisfied with your final chapter? Would you be embarrassed if others were to read about your shortcomings? Or would you feel incomplete because your life goal was never accomplished and the many things you've spoken about achieving never showed up in the text because you neglected to take action in pursuing them? What remains unwritten in your story? Are there any goals left unachieved? Well, maybe you could relate to me. Is back way yonder is I didn't realize that the mistakes I made could be turned around, that could actually be turned into successes that could help other people. Let me explain. Because here I was at 15 years old. I was in the back of a police car twice in 10 days. All I wanted to do was fit in. And this is where it led me. I'm supposed to be a good kid. Was this where my story would end? But it didn't. It didn't end there because of a few individuals in the room who helped me get to where I am in life. Let me introduce you to them. Gentlemen, you could join me up on the stage. So come on, don't be shy. Now let me say one thing before we get started. Is that all these individuals that are behind me right now, through their legacies that they left with their life, they're still continuing to impact us today. Let me introduce them to you. Over here in this corner, we have George Washington Carver, Abraham Lincoln, and not Charlie Tremendous Jones, legendary coach John Wooden. Not sure if Charlie Tremendous Jones could make it here tonight. But I asked these gentlemen to come back from the dead to give us one thing that we could use with the remainder of our story. That we have literally thousands upon thousands upon thousands of pages in our story that remain unwritten. That we could do whatever we want to with it. And so I asked all these gentlemen to give us one thing that we could apply. George Washington Carver. Now, you are most famous for inventing over 300 discoveries of the peanut and over 40 uses for the sweet potato. But George, one thing goes unnoticed in your life. Tell us about it. I always enjoyed being helpful more than any of the achievements I've had in my life. Back when I was at Iowa State University, I had the splendid opportunity to take the professor's son, little 6-year-old Henry Wallace. Oh, he was rambunctious, but he was great. I had the opportunity to take him on botanical expeditions on the weekends. And I was able to instill in this young man the importance and necessity of plants. And man, I had no idea where he would go with his life. I lost track. But one day he went on to become Vice President of the United States. And he used his department to hire an eventual Nobel Peace Prize winner, Norman Borlaug, who invented a way to hybridize corn and wheat in dry and arid climates, saving over 2 million people and counting. And I had no idea what being helpful during that time would produce. And Mr. Carver, you were extremely helpful to the world. And I truly believe that you became even more successful when you were willing to give of yourself to others. You epitomize being helpful. Now, does anyone know what it says on Mr. Carver's epitaph? You mind if I share it with them? Oh, you're dead anyways, you can't hurt me. He could have added fortune to fame, but caring for neither, he found honor in being helpful to the world. Let's move on to our second guest, who is arguably one of the greatest presidents and leaders that our nation has seen. Abraham Lincoln. Now, Mr. Lincoln, you do not have a high school education. So how in the world did you go from a career of manual labor to lawyer to becoming president of the United States? I had a burning desire to leave my mark on the world. And I wasn't afraid to take risks. Each day going out and working in the fields, it zapped me of energy. It took my motivation and my drive away from life. But when I noticed people who were lawyers, I knew that's it. That's what I want to do. But I had many factors working against me. My family didn't have any prestigious status. I lacked education. I lacked money. And I lacked time. But I could do one thing. I could teach myself law in my free time. And so I went out and I borrowed books and I sought out advice. And I began to learn law in my free time. Literally, I would wake up hours before work. I would stay awake, oftentimes falling asleep with the book on my lap. And it paid off. As I passed the bar exam, obtaining a license to practice law without even having to step foot in the university. And I accomplished this by teaching myself. Mr. Lincoln, you made me think of a self-help quote. That if you read for an hour a day in a concentrated subject area, that in 5 years' time, you'll become an expert in that field. And Mr. Lincoln, you show us how it's possible that we can still pursue our dreams by using our free time to educate ourselves for the person we want to become in the future. Coach John Wooden. And you're probably highly familiar with what John Wooden did at UCLA. And he coached the UCLA men's basketball team onto 10 national championships and 7 of those were won in consecutive years. Coach, what is your secret to success? The best teachers and the best coaches are ones that model winning habits. Now, Coach Wooden, I've noticed something about you and Vince Lombardi and other championship coaches, and that is you spend a lot of your free time reading books. And reading books won't help players run faster, it won't win games. So what value is there in reading books? Reading helps me teach winning habits to my players. Before they can be champions on the court, they have to be champions off. And if you've ever noticed this, is that there's something different among champions in sports, in life, in whatever career field they're in, than non-champions. Achievers live a completely different lifestyle than non-achievers, and it comes down to developing winning habits. What winning habits will you develop? Coach Wooden, Abraham Lincoln, and Mr. Carver, I want to thank you guys for your time tonight. If you could please be seated. Don't trip. But there's more. Is that they just came in with, what's your name, sir?
Mike Pichon.
Yeah, and they just came in the door with Mike. We have 3 more guests from the past. Well, really, not from the past. 2 from the present. Gentlemen, you could join us up here on stage as well. Do you know who they are? Let me introduce them to you. Over here, we have Andy Andrews, Charlie Tremendous Jones, and John Maxwell. Have you ever heard of John Maxwell? All right, Andy Andrews, we're going to begin with you. Now, Andy, you are one of my favorite authors, and you were formerly homeless. And one of the things I've noticed in reading a lot of your material is that there's a consistent theme of overcoming adversity. Tell us a little bit more about that theme. When I was a teenager, I ended up losing both parents in a car accident. I was hurting, I was depressed, and I was angry, and it led me to becoming homeless. And I'll never forget it. And I wrote about this extensively in my book, The Noticer, that there was this old man named Jones who came underneath my pier one day. I was homeless in Alabama near the beach. And this old man who was quick on his feet, he was wise, and he could just articulate words very, very well. And he came underneath my pier, and he handed me 3 biographies. And he said, read these. And when you're finished, return them back to the library. And I did. And when I went to return the books, something took hold of me inside. And I noticed that there's a vast collection of them on the back wall. And one by one, I began to read each and every single one of the biographies in that collection. And through those stories, I was able to see how I could overcome the adversity in my life. learning from theirs. Andy Andrews, your work has helped me to overcome adversity in my life. Charlie Tremendous Jones, we're going to move on to you. Now isn't today tremendous? Anyone? Didn't you just wake up out of bed this morning, you pull out the covers and you go, life's tremendous! This guy does it every single morning. Charlie Tremendous Jones was a famous author, speaker, and college professor, and he devoted the majority of his life of discovering ways to place tremendous life books into the hands of tremendous people because he knew it would yield, not tremendous, phenomenal results. Now, Charlie, you must have known something about the potential contained in books that not a lot of people know. Tell us about it. Books are really powerful. The true potential contained in books is even more powerful than knowledge. You know, books are a detonator of thought. That remote you pull out with a button and you press it, and kaboom! Reading the works of higher level thought enables you to think, imagine, and dream in ways that you never thought possible. And the reason I've made it my life mission to pass along these books to others was because I knew this. That hidden in the pages of every book you read are over 200 new thoughts just waiting for you to discover them. And when you do, you can become your own problem solver. And the more books you read, the more valuable you become to the world. Because you'll be able to solve even higher level problems than what you face in your personal life. Thank you, Mr. Jones. We're going to move on to John Maxwell over here. And John, we're going to conclude the night with you. Now, has anyone ever met John Maxwell before, know who he is, read any of his books? Are you signing any autographs tonight? John Maxwell. Yeah, have I ever told? Does anyone know the story about the role that his father played in his life? Can I tell him? John's father, Melvin Maxwell, got him hooked on reading when he was young. And it was because of reading those books that now John stands as an individual who has written the most about leadership than any other person to date. And John, you have something special you want to share with us tonight? Like I sure do. Thank you for the kind introduction. But something I've been inspired by quite recently was by a janitor. And this janitor was a more avid reader than what I've ever been. And so I decided that I would invite him to a formal gathering held at a location by a lake, along with community leaders, other entrepreneurs, and other people of influence. And as travel worked out, I got there late. And when I showed up, I was shocked. Here's this janitor, and he has these entrepreneurs and these people of influence. He has them mesmerized in conversation. I mean, he's dropping $1,000 words. He's recalling events from history with precision, and his wisdom is just blowing them away. And I thought to myself, I'm not going to ruin this. Because if I go over there and I tell him that he's a janitor, the whole thing's going to blow. So I let him go. Reading makes you interesting. Mr. Maxwell, Mr. Jones, and Andy Andrews, you can make your way back to your seats. How will your story be different as a result of tonight? What will you do with the remaining pages of your story? Remember me. I started out in the back of a police car. But through the help of the gentleman on the stage, I didn't stay there. I went on to win 2 powerlifting state championships in high school, be elected student government president at my community college, and I'm pressing on, and I'm pursuing my dream of becoming a speaker. What about you? And our guests tonight each taught us one thing. We've learned how to be helpful, that we can be self-taught, and we can prepare in the meantime for what we want to become. That we need to build our life on winning habits, overcome adversity, problem solve, and unlock our uniqueness and becoming interesting through the books that we read. And as I stand before you tonight, and as each day goes past, these empty pages are being filled with words. Whether you want them to be there or not. And they're turning. And they're turning. And they're turning. And they're going to continue to turn. Will you allow this book to write itself, or will you write the book? You decide. Madam President.